She is sweet, Daddy." The obese bride was laughed off until the cowboy's daughter called her. The church bell tolled slow and heavy, each note rolling through the dusty main street like a hammer on her chest. The whole town seemed to have gathered in their Sunday best, hats tipped against the early sun, eyes turned toward the white chapel that stood like a promise at the end of the road. She stood just outside its doors, gloved hands knotted together, breath shallow as if the morning air might betray her. Her dress was new, stitched by her own hands, a little tight at the seams where fabric strained over soft curves, but it was the prettiest thing she had ever owned. She had saved months for it. The veil trembled slightly where it brushed her shoulders. She had imagined this day 1,000 times, imagined a quiet smile from the man waiting for her inside, imagined the hush when she stepped through the door. She had imagined that this would be the moment everything finally began. The door creaked. A boy no older than 14 came out, hat crushed in his hands. He wouldn't quite look at her. His voice stumbled as he said the words. "He isn't coming." For a moment she couldn't breathe. The street seemed to blur around her, and all the soft murmurs became cruel music. She had heard whispers before about her roundness, about whether she was pretty enough, but she had believed his voice when he swore none of that mattered. Now she understood he had lied. The first laugh was small, a sharp exhale somewhere near the hitching post. Then another. Then the sound of two women whispering too loud, gloved hands covering their smiles. She felt her face burn hot under the veil. Slowly, carefully, as if every step weighed 100 pounds, she turned away from the church and began to walk. Dust rose around her boots. The street was too long, the air too still. Children gawked, mothers hissed at them to hush, but did not look away. The preacher's wife shook her head sadly. She kept walking until the town was a smear behind her, and the prairie opened up wide and cruel, the sky too blue, the sun too bright for her grief. By the time she reached the little cabin she called home, her dress was streaked with dirt, and her throat was sore from holding back sound. She closed the door, slid down against it, and pressed her fists to her eyes until the world went dark. That night she sat at the small table and stared at the dress crumpled on the chair. It was no longer a dress, but a thing that mocked her, that reminded her of laughter. Something inside her hardened. At dawn, she would leave this place. There was nothing left here but stares and snickers, nothing but the taste of shame. While she packed a small satchel, a shawl, a tin cup, a few biscuits, the town's other houses stirred awake. On the edge of the range, a man sat on his porch steps, hat tipped low, watching the sky catch fire with sunrise. He was a broad man with wind-lined eyes, a face carved by quiet years. Beside him, a little girl of 6 wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and leaned against his side, blinking up at the colors bleeding across the horizon. She asked what everyone had been whispering about last night. She had seen the lady in white run past their house, had seen the dust cling to her hem. The man didn't answer right away. He had heard the story in town, how the groom had walked away. He spat into the dirt, more to himself than anyone, and said only that folks could be cruel. The girl's small brow furrowed. She asked why they had laughed. He didn't know how to explain the meanness of grown-ups to a child whose heart still believed the world was soft. She said the lady looked sad. He said yes, she did. The conversation fell quiet, but something about the girl's soft, stubborn voice lodged in him like a thorn. When the sun was barely up, the young woman left. The road stretched before her, a ribbon of dust winding out into nowhere. She walked until the skin of her heels split, until her legs ached, until she had put enough distance between herself and the chapel that she could breathe again. She did not know exactly where she was going, only that she could not stay where everyone knew her shame. By midday she found herself near the edge of a cattle range, exhausted. She sat under the shade of a lone cottonwood tree, unwrapped her bundle, and ate one of the hard biscuits slowly. Her dress was rumpled, her hair clung to her damp face, and she felt smaller than she had ever been. Hoofbeats approached, slow and measured. She looked up and saw the little girl first, perched in front of the saddle, her braids bouncing as the horse stopped. The man swung down, dusted his hands on his trousers, and looked at her with neither pity nor judgment, only a quiet curiosity. The girl tilted her head, studying the stranger's face. Then she turned to her father and said in the unguarded voice of children, "She is sweet, Daddy." For a long moment no one spoke. The words felt like warm water poured over a wound she had not known how to tend. The man crouched, offered her a tin of cool water. She took it carefully, sipped, and handed it back. He said she looked like she could use a place to rest. There was an empty bunkhouse near the barn if she wanted a roof over her head tonight. She shook her head at first, embarrassed to be seen so ragged, but the girl slid off a horse and came to her side, taking her hand with an ease that broke through her pride. Together they walked back. The yard smelled of hay and leather, the barn door stood open, chickens clucked softly near the coop. The man set a lantern inside the bunkhouse and left her alone, no questions asked. That night she lay on the narrow cot, staring up at the rafters. For the first time since the church bells had rung, her chest did not feel like it was caving in. Outside, she could hear the little girl's laughter carried by the wind, high and light like something fragile and good. She turned her face toward the sound and let a small, shaky breath slip free. Perhaps tomorrow she would decide where she was headed. For tonight, she let the lantern's glow hold her, like a single star that refused to burn out. Morning came soft and gold, the kind that draped the yard in quiet mercy. She stepped from the bunkhouse barefoot, the boards cool beneath her feet, and breathed in the smell of dew on grass. The world felt different today, as if the ground had forgiven her for treading it yesterday in shame. The man was already at work, hat low over his brow as he hauled water to the trough. He nodded once when he saw her, nothing more, but the gesture carried no judgment. The girl came running, hair half braided, and pressed a slice of warm bread into her hands as if she had been waiting all morning for this moment. So began the days that stitched themselves into weeks. She stayed because leaving no longer felt urgent, because the land did not laugh at her when she passed, because the little girl's joy was a kind of welcome she had never known. She swept the bunkhouse, cooked when she could, mended clothes with careful stitches. She found that her hands were steadier when they had something to do. He was not a man of many words, but she came to know him through quiet things, the way he carried the girl gently despite his rough palms, the way he checked the sky at dusk like a man always measuring what tomorrow might bring. Sometimes she would see him watching her as she worked, his gaze not lingering in hunger but in thought, as though he were trying to place where she belonged. Little by little, something in her began to grow back. One evening she sat with the girl on the porch steps, brushing her hair, as the sun slid behind the hills, and for the first time she laughed. It was a small, startled sound, but it startled her most of all. He heard it from the corral, and paused, one hand resting on the rail, listening like a man hearing music through a closed door. The world beyond their fence had not forgotten her, though. Word traveled faster than wind in a small town, and soon riders passed by with smirks, their voices carrying across the yard. They said the man must be desperate if he had taken her in, said worse things in tones meant to pierce. The words stung, though she stood straighter now when she heard them. That night she sat at the table, staring at her hands. He came in and set his hat down, saw the storm in her eyes, and for the first time spoke more than a few words. He said the world was cruel because it was easy, because cruelty cost a man nothing, but kindness cost him pride and labor. He said the girl did not laugh like that before she came, and that was proof enough that her presence was not shameful. The girl climbed into her lap, hugging her neck, and repeated softly, "She is sweet, Daddy." The words undid her. She bowed her head, tears falling silent. The man reached across the table, covering her hand with his. There was nothing romantic in it yet, just an offering of steadiness, as if to say he would not let the world push her out again. From that night on, she no longer thought of herself as a guest. She worked alongside him, gathering eggs, helping with calves, even learning to ride a sturdy old mare. The girl's laughter became a regular music in the yard, and sometimes he would glance toward the bunkhouse with a look that was no longer just thoughtful, but quietly certain. As weeks turned to months, the season changed. The first chill crept in with the autumn wind. One evening, when the sky burned orange, he found her sitting on the porch steps, shawl around her shoulders, staring at the horizon. He sat down beside her, boots heavy on the boards, and was silent for a long while. Then he said he did not want her to leave when winter came. Her heart thudded. She asked why, voice small. He said because the house felt full for the first time in years, because the girl ran to the door now when she heard her voice, because he had grown used to her laughter and the quiet way she moved through the rooms. The words hung between them like the first stars of night, faint but certain. She nodded once, not trusting her voice. A week later, they went to town for Sunday service. The whole place seemed to hold its breath when they walked in together, the man, the girl between them, and her in the dress she had repaired with her own hands. Whispers started like dry leaves, quick and cutting. But this time he did not look away. When they reached the steps of the chapel, he stopped, turned to her, and took her hand in front of them all. There was no speech, no grand show, just a quiet claiming. The girl grinned, so wide it looked as though her face might split, and said again, for everyone to hear, "She is sweet, Daddy." The whispers stilled. Some faces turned away in shame, others in shock, but no one laughed. The preacher gave a nod, and they stepped inside together. After the service, they walked back out into the bright morning. The town's noise faded behind them, leaving only the sound of the girl's happy chatter and the wind in the grass. She felt as though she had stepped out of a long shadow. That night, lantern light pooled warm on the table as they ate supper together, not guest and host, but something closer to family. Outside, the prairie spread quiet and wide, and the stars came out one by one as if to witness. She lay awake in the bunkhouse later, listening to the faint sound of the girl's laughter through the window, and thought how strange it was that this house, this quiet man, this child, had turned a day of shame into the start of something whole. Perhaps tomorrow they would speak of the future, perhaps not. For tonight it was enough to know that the world had not swallowed her. She belonged somewhere now, and belonging, she thought as she drifted towards sleep, was the sweetest thing she had ever been called. If this tale touched your heart, subscribe for more Wild West stories of love, courage, and second chances.